Welcome, everybody. President Daly couldn't be with us this evening. She's receiving a Make a Difference Award from her students at Chester Elementary. Congratulations to Jen. But we do have with us Ezra Clemenson. Welcome, our newest board trustee. Ezra and I were both elected just last week for the next 3 years. So thank you. He's with us today as a non-voting member. Just wanted to say welcome, welcome to the team. And this is a good time, one way or another, to start reaching out to us if you have any questions. You may already know how this goes. I don't know. Maybe I have some questions for you.
I know a shred.
Yeah.
I know a
Good, but welcome.
Thank you.
So the next meeting of the Haldane Board of Education is scheduled for Tuesday, June 21st at 6:15 in the Auditorium, small gym. We're going to take an immediate recess for tenure recognitions and reconvene at approximately 7 for the workshop meeting, and that workshop topic is a strategic coherence plan update. And I think that's it. I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Benante.
Welcome, Ezra. Again, congratulations to you. I know we're all looking forward to working with you. I also wanted to introduce Dr. Regina Cation, who you appointed last month to be our new Director of People Personnel Services. Regina wanted to stop by this evening and say hello, and I know she'll have a chance to come around after the meeting's concluded to say hello again. You'll have the opportunity to interview Regina, and she has since started on campus this week. And be on the lookout. I saw today the flyer for the meet and greet that the Learning Differences Committee is hosting, so that's wonderful. And I know Regina's been making her rounds this week, and welcome to Haldane. I know you're off to a good start. Just a few remarks from me, Sean. It's a very celebratory time on campus as we bring the school year to a close. There's many classroom and events and activities that are ongoing, including our moving up ceremonies that are scheduled for the last week of school, and high school commencement scheduled next Saturday. I look forward to seeing you all there. And I just wanted to thank our community for your continued support of our schools. We've had a good school year. It's nice to bring it to closure as we look towards next year. And and the weather and everything on campus has been really spectacular. So it serves as a nice backdrop for our end of year activities. I did want to provide a couple of updates, extended updates, since it has been a bit of time since we last met with the Memorial Day holiday in between. First, the matter related to the Garrison tuition and the Garrison budget vote has been something that's received quite a bit of attention through the spring and their budget development. And I shared a message with the community prior to break. I just wanted to reiterate some points from that this evening, and if there's any further discussion with the board, we certainly can have that. But first, we consider all of our students who attend Haldane to be our students, and I don't want that to be lost in the discussion around finances and costs and those measures. So if a student is here, they are our student, and I know that our faculty and our staff and our administration staff treats every child here as if they are our own, and that's important, and that undergirds, I feel, the actions that we've taken over the course of these last 2 months. We've worked with Garrison to arrive at an agreement in principle for next school year to put a tuition in place that secures all students who either currently attend Haldane from the Garrison community or who were scheduled to attend Haldane, meaning those 8th graders who had already planned to come to Haldane, their continued attendance at our school. So that wouldn't be subject to any vote, if you will, through the Garrison budget process. And we felt that was really important for those students, their well-being, their families, obviously, to have that sense of stability around where they're going to school. That being said, I've expressed to Garrison a continued desire to evaluate the tuition structure beyond that. So for any current 7th graders and those students below, after they've had a chance to get beyond their budget process for this school year. So as we know, it's important, and we certainly give Garrison our full support as they continue to work on their budget. And we obviously wish them success in doing so for their next budget vote. But we felt that it was important to put a structure in place first and foremost for the kids who are scheduled to attend Haldane or who already do, and then to revisit the matter after we get beyond their next budget vote when we have a little bit more space to do so. Hopefully that allows Garrison to focus on what's in front of them and as they should be right now, and it also gives us the space through the summer months to come back and revisit an important part of our district budget. So we can maintain, we're responsibly accounting for the entire Haldane community's interests, our students and their families, but also our taxpayers as well. So we'll revisit that after the school year ends. And sadly, I think it was at the last meeting I spoke of the shooting incident in Buffalo, and here again, we're faced with another recent school shooting now in Texas, and it's real tragedy and something that unfortunately for those of us who work in schools or around schools and supporting it has become all too common. And I've spoken or corresponded with several families regarding this matter. It appropriately provokes feelings of anxiety and concern about school safety in our own schools. As I've shared with those families and with our administrative staff, this really serves as a point of reflection of our need to consistently evaluate our safety practices on our campus and around our campus, any applicable laws that may apply as it relates to safety on campus, and the best practices that are recommended to us by our safety and security specialists, which includes the Putnam County Sheriff's Office via Deputy Tulvey, as well as the Alteris Consulting Group, who we contract with to provide such services to us, and we work with on a continued basis throughout the school year. And I just want to ensure our board and our community that we are doing that work. We've been very deliberate over the course of the last 4 years that I can speak to in making continued enhancements to our safety and security processes and procedures on campus, and I feel good about that. That being said, there's more that we can do, and we have a responsibility to continue to keep that at our fore. I have spoken or heard from some of our families of the benefit of hosting some sort of forum where families can come to understand more about what the school has done, and also to hear concerns from families that they may continue to have about safety around our campus. I do think that that's a good idea at some point to do. Obviously, this time of year, we're competing with many schedules, not only our own school schedule and what's going on, but also families I know and kids have all their extracurriculars are going on as well. So I don't think that June is the best space to try to host such an important forum, but I'll be looking to do so in the fall at some point when we just have a little bit more time to lean into a conversation around that. And I'll be sure to keep our community apprised of when that discussion will occur. What I would encourage folks as a tangent, a related note to do, though, is to help us out. There's a school climate survey that's out there that's open through this week, and perceptions of school safety is a component of that. Survey. So there's approximately 150 families have completed that survey up to this point. I really would like to see that number increase. It's a good start. It's the first time we're doing this, and a reminder will be sent out over the course of the next 2 days for anybody who can take 10 minutes of their time to provide us with some important information around their perception of our school climate. And safety is just one component of that. So there's several others as well. And that's an important instrument for us to lean into to further guide our improvement practices on campus in the year to come. I'll pause there. That concludes my remarks. If there's any questions from the board, I'll be happy to take them.
So there's also a student climate survey?
Yes, there
and
is.
a staff climate survey.
Correct.
How are the response rates?
Our response rate for the student survey at the elementary and middle school levels is very good. Mm-hmm. At the high school level, not as strong, but we still have some time, and I know Mrs. Sniffin's coming back to that with our kids. Probably didn't help that our seniors are largely off campus right now, right? But that being said, there's still time, and we're hopeful we can get we can have a higher completion rate there. And I would say our student response rates are over 80% at the K-8 level. At the 3-8 level. It was
Right.
not designed for students at the K-2
That makes
level.
sense.
At the staff level, we're hovering right around 50%. Varies by building and by staff. And this is all staff, by the way, maintenance and operation, cafeteria staff, support staff. So we have committed to giving each staff the space during the school day to complete the
That's what I was
survey.
go- Yeah, I
Yes,
was going to ask that. That's important.
So that's important. So we've tried to eliminate every barrier that potentially could present to interfere with that. And again, there's still 2 days. So I think, as you know, we tend to see these blips of completion right at the beginning, maybe in the middle, and then right at the end. So my hope is that any lingering staff members, students, or family members who wish to take the survey will do so over the course of the next 3 days.
May I make another
Please.
comment? So I think I want to make sure that folks that are watching this are aware that since you've joined the district, you've brought on Alteris as our
Yes.
shift topics, to really help us do a really solid and thorough review and put in place a safety plan. And that for folks to know that there are portions of that available on the website. I mean, I want folks to know that I feel like one of the things, I remember when the Parkland shooting happened, and there was a huge amount of anxiety around that. Our committees were structured maybe a little bit differently,
They were.
so that actually served as an
Did.
opportunity for a forum. That's not the best forum for it. I think it's much more important to really, plan and do this thoughtfully. But I just want to make sure that people are aware that since that time, the district has worked to be as proactive as we can be to really address these issues and let people know that there's information available on the website.
Thank you.
And that's actually one of the things I'm actually enormously appreciative of that you've done, was bring in Alteris, because I feel like it's been very systematic and systemic.
Thank you. And I think in speaking to the families who have reached out, as they come to understand that, of course, we hear, well, it would be good for others to hear this, thus, as a component of a forum of sorts, because I realize that everybody's bandwidth is pretty thin these days. So having a dedicated space, if families are interested to come in, we can do so now in a recorded fashion, where if families aren't able to attend, they can at least see who our Alteris representative is, meet them, hear a little bit about what their work has been with the school district, make Deputy Tolvey available to hear a little bit about what his work in the school district looks like, hear about the preventative or proactive measures that we've been taking, and then also a litany of other things that we've done over the last 4 years to try to make our schools, to continue to make our schools a very safe space for kids and for families and staff. Let me leave that up.
No other questions?
Nope. So we'll transition to Mr. Elder's presentation on the New York State assessment results. As Josh is getting set up, I'll just mention, by way of board policy, we should be providing back to the board a report on our student performance on state assessments. We've done this in the past. One thing I would like to note is that as Josh is presenting, this has become increasingly complicated, I guess, the interpretation of the state assessment results, in particular over these last few years, because there's been quite a few changes to the test format and how the tests have been implemented. Josh will speak to still a high level of participation that's occurred, but as the assessment has been normed, we've lost the ability to use these as points of comparison across other schools or districts in the state because of participation rates being so low statewide. That being said, all good conversation or things to discuss here over the next few minutes as Josh provides us with an overview, and then we dive into questions that the board may have. Josh, I'll scoot out of the way, and thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Board of Education, Dr. Benante. Good evening, and thanks so much. So I'm here tonight to provide the New York State Assessment Results Update, and this is on the year 2021. So I do want to mention that this is not based on the tests that students took this year. This is based upon the tests that students took last spring. Prior to me starting, I would just like to say a tremendous thank you to my colleagues, Ms. Julia Sniffen, Dr. Marianne Selke, and Ms. Christine Jamin. As somebody new to the district, they were very instrumental, and their helping me to provide some context and answer my questions and putting this together was greatly appreciated. And I always like to just thank Miss Judy Barbera, who was also very helpful in providing some context in some of her past performances as well. I'm sure she's listening out there, so I just want to say thank you. Right. So yeah, like I said, we're here to talk about the 2021 New York State assessment results, and Dr. Benante alluded to some of the extraordinary circumstances that surrounds kind of talking about this information. But kind of on a macro level, when we're talking about assessment practices, we're never looking or zeroing in on one particular avenue. Best practices talk about triangulating measures and using multiple measures of assessment data to kind of gain a picture and understanding. And so in this slide, we have classroom assessment, which sits at the top for really a reason. It's symbolic in that way. These are the ways in which broken down into formative assessments as well as summative assessments that are taking place more routinely within our classrooms through a localized curriculum and provide really opportunities for our educators to kind of collaborate and talk about results and take action items with them. Not that that's necessarily not true about the bottom measures, but down below we have the NWA, the measures of academic performance, which we utilize, as well as the New York State Education Department, those assessments in grades 3 through 8. And while they are standardized measures, they each operate just a little bit differently between the two of them. So the NWA, or the Northwest Evaluation Association, is the measure of academic progress. And I do have to apologize, that is a typo. It is not all K-5 students, okay? That should read all K-8 students and select secondary students. This is completed at least twice a year. It's a computer adaptive test, right, that students log into. There's a tremendous bank of questions that students use. We use the subtests in reading and math. Students log in, it's personalized, it's differentiated to them. Like it says, it's adaptive. So based upon student responses, the computer kind of adjusts the level of questions through a timed process to which tries to kind of get at a situation of trying to measure a student's ability area, in particular responses to both reading as well as mathematics. The beauty about kind of a standardized method in this way is we can implement it multiple times throughout a school year because the bank of questions kind of doesn't recycle in some ways. It's so responsive that it's not the same set for students. So while this is a standardized way of kind of measuring students, it kind of acts as like a universal screener. That's a terminology we can use that we can give to all grade level bands. So that data that comes out of that is universally applied to everybody. In the area of data, it's important to have kind of a universal way that we can talk about data in similar ways with teachers. It also kind of ways of assessing growth throughout a school year. So you could give it twice a year, but our practice is for other students that exhibit situations where we might want to assess them more, we have the ability to do that. So if we're seeing kind of readings up and down, right, we can kind of triangulate that and try to get a better measure or baseline of a student's performance. Before I start talking about the 2021 New York State assessments, I did want to kind of have a little disclaimer, and Dr. Benante talked a little bit about this. But I don't have to remind everybody, but 2020 and 2021 was an extraordinary year. And in the fall of this year, the State Education Department put out this statement, which just basically states, in an ordinary year, the percentage of students who participate in the test is typically over 80%. Therefore, the 2021 grades 3 through 8 assessment results are not representative of the state's population and should not be compared to that of previous school years, statewide, or among subgroups of students. As a result, the department is not making statewide comparisons of data, and only district and school level results are posted on the website. It goes on to kind of just state, this year, just 4 in 10 students took the test, so the data does not reflect the majority of students. And while Haldane was not immune to any of this, as Dr. Benante said, our participation rates were exceedingly higher than this. In grades 3 through 5, in both ELA and math, we average about 93% participation rate of our students. And in grades 6 through 8 in ELA and math, we hover around the 85% mark. So in an extraordinary year, our students participated. Even though, as we have to go back, we were in K-8 every day, there were multiple disruptions to that. There were quarantines, there were students remote, there was in and out of instruction, there was learning through screens, there was technical difficulties, there was all of those things. And our students in grades 9 through 10 were hybrid, 2 days remote, 2 days in person, and that continued for the better part of half the school year. So there's a story to be told here, but I think as I looked at some of these results, it's important to kind of keep a context as to what our students faced last year and to what our teachers also faced last year. But it was interesting to note that our participation rates here in Haldane were exceedingly higher than that of the state's average. Just a quick kind of recap about New York State assessments. They are given in grades 3 through 8, and they are on-demand tests that are designed to measure students' proficiency with the New York State learning standards with the purpose of trying to ensure that students are either on track to graduate or are making progress or meeting the standards that are in these disciplines as well as specific grade level bands. They are given in English language arts in grades 3 through 8, math grades 3 through 8, and science in grades 4 and 8 currently, although the science one is changing. The tests are untimed and they're administered in 2 sessions. Interesting to note, for last year, the state did say that they had attempted to shorten the test, given the unusual circumstances that schools were faced. The test items themselves are aligned with New York State learning standards, and they're developed by a sample set of New York State teachers statewide. There's both multiple choice and there's open-ended items on each test that allows for written communication. The questions are designed to measure critical thinking, problem solving, and written language, and also require students to describe and defend their reasoning in ways. Some of the questions are released with the test result, and they release those questions to teachers. Some test questions within the test themselves are sample questions, which don't actually count, but they're utilized to generate future tests. And the results are shared with both teachers and parents. Just a little primer. Sorry about that. So before we dive into this, I just want to kind of orient us to the information here for a minute. In putting the presentation together, even though the state said we should not be comparing against groups or subgroups or other years, I felt that there was a need to provide some context to the numbers. And as we traditionally look at similar schools in the areas, as I went through and uncovered the participation rates of our typical similar schools, they were far off from what Haldane's was, and made those types of comparisons ultimately irrelevant in ways, to the point where some of the schools just didn't even have accurate data to even report upon. So in going through this, I felt like one way of trying to orient ourselves was to think of performance of our students the last time the exam was actually given, which would have been in the spring of 2019. So for historical, it was in 2019. In the spring of 2020, we were all on shutdown and remote, and those tests were canceled, were not provided, and then they were again given last spring in 2021. Right. The column that sits to the left of each data group is the student performance in 2021, and the column that sits to the right of that is student performance in 2019. And it demonstrates students that are demonstrating proficiency, which talks about students who are generally given a score of a 3, 4, or 5. It is on a scale of 5, so 1 and 2 would be deemed to be not proficient, and scores of 3, 4, and 5 would be deemed to be proficient. In different bands, obviously, with 5 being mastery, exceeding, 4 kind of mastering or meeting, and the 3 kind of proficiency. Right. I'm going to just give a moment to kind of look at that data. It's a lot. I will pause after a couple of points to see if there are questions. Again, our participation rate last year in grade 3 was 85% for ELA. Our participation rate in grade 4 was 96%, and our participation rate in grade 5 was 95%.
Just a couple of questions. Were they renormed in the middle?
I'm not sure of that. Okay. The tests?
Yeah.
The best information they provided was that the tests were shortened and they had fewer questions and required kind of less time to complete. Okay. I don't know the response if they were renormed.
Okay, that's fine. And so would I say that would it be correct to say that the dark bar in grade 3 is subsequently represented by the light bar in grade 5?
Correct.
Those are the same groups of students. Okay, cool.
Correct.
All right.
That is the same cohort.
Yep. All right, cool.
And how do the participation rates compare? So
I have that information. So in 2021, in grade 3, our participation rate was 85%. In 2019, our participation rate was 100%. In grade 4, our participation rate in 2021 was 96%. And then our participation rate in grade 4 in 2019 was 94%. Grade 5 in 2021 was 95%, and grade 5 in 2019 was 91%.
And so again, the participation rate from grade 3, as that cohort moves through, right? So that
Yep.
basically tracks, because basically it was 100%.
And it was
Those kids,
95.
It was 95%,
Correct.
right.
I'm going to just state something. I really appreciate sort of having something to compare to, because otherwise it's really hard to look at these kind of numbers. I think the one thing I want us all to keep in mind is, Haldane is unique because our grade levels are so small. And so one of the things you see with small groups is you see what we sometimes in research call, these cohort effects. Like you can see really meaningful differences from year to year in how kids are doing it, which makes these grade comparisons across year a little bit tricky, because it's two really different groups of kids. If we were a school district of, thousands and thousands and thousands of kids, I would feel more comfortable comparing a third grade from 2019 to a third grade of 2021. With these small groups, the grades really have their own characters and characteristics, I guess I would say, but it's still very useful to see.
And I think that was the point that John was
Right,
probably
right,
making.
very,
Really,
yeah,
the most
absolutely.
valuable thing on that is to look at
that's
grade
exactly
3 as they go into grade
Right.
5. That's our, the best amount of meat that we have to actually analyze it much.
Great. I'm going to move on. This is ELA grades 6 through 8. Didn't know if you want additional information I could provide on the last one. I'm happy to. Okay. And then, again, even though it wasn't suggested, we did the same for what we usually report on, which is our subgroups of percentage of students achieving proficiency with our students with disabilities and students who are economically disadvantaged students, which this information was provided us by the state of New York to our specific district, but not compared to other districts. Again, same orientation on the left-hand side. The lighter blue is 2021. The darker blue on the right would be 2019.
How big are those schools?
Yeah. Okay.
Those cohorts are not very large. They're generally in the teens. Right? Shifting, we go to mathematics. Same setup. And again, our participation rates in there were extremely high in 2021, averaging about 95% across all 3 grade levels. And similarly in 2019, probably averaged around the 92-93% mark.
So is this a call out to what I think Ms. Jamin or maybe Dr. Selke was talking about to us was it a year ago? Time really has no meaning anymore about the potential larger impact of COVID on math specifically? Would you?
Yeah, I think I would take that even more broadly, is the specific impact on COVID in general. I think we're seeing from numbers from ELA, they tend to be, if we look at them, but I still think there's impacts within those areas as well.
Sure.
But yeah, I think anytime you're kind of looking at data over years or comparing against years, you're always trying to look at them within context. And even in normal years, you're trying to find environmental things that may or may not. I think the impact of COVID and being remote and being quarantined and missing a semester in 2020, yeah, I think we're all saying this in the field, we're saying there are delays or setbacks. I think it's going to take some time to actually see this play itself out, and to actually see what those impacts are, quite frankly.
And you're right, that time has no meaning anymore. It's, waiting for Josh to respond as if he was here last year, and I'm remembering that he wasn't yet with us. So I wanted to give him a shot to answer it, and I realized he wasn't here then. Yes, Christine and Mary Ann both pointed out and called out some concerns related to mathematics. I believe they both had cited student results on the NWEA assessment last school year, because that was being administered in the fall as compared to the state assessment. But the state assessment was then administered later on in the school year, thus the results that you're seeing now. So I think you're on the mark in tying that thread between comments that you heard from our principals at the beginning of the school year, as reflected on the a more local assessment, and also now being reflected later on in the school year through their state assessment results.
And then this is mathematics, grades 6 through 8 by grade level. And so, there's another button to press, excuse me. So when you see the dip here, well, the lower bars, right? In 8th grade, the cohort splits. We have students who take Algebra 1, so 29 of our students took the algebra regents. Students who take the algebra regents do not take the Math 8 assessment. And then we had 33 students as our cohort of taking the New York State Math 8 assessment.
Is proficiency based on, proficiency is not based on algebra, it's based on New York State Math 8.
Correct. Right. So algebra in 8th grade is considered an accelerated course.
Right.
And the kind of regular or normal introduction would be
Right.
New York State 8. They are different assessments.
Right. So even though we're pulling out the students from 6 to 8 who are participating in algebra, we would expect and want all of our Math 8 students, regardless of the fact that there's a smaller cohort, to be demonstrating higher levels of proficiency.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. So even though we're pulling some students out, a point I think that this brings up is, in ways in which we're thinking about our 8th grade students who take New York State Math 8 assessments, and better understanding them as learners and thinking about proficiency levels within that cohort of students.
If you looked at that, can you look at that cohort in grade 6 over time?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that the gap will be, yes, I should say, yes.
Yep, that's it.
And then same thing with, we did subgroups as well, because this data was reported to us as a school district. Same thing in the light bar would talk about students with disabilities in 2021, and the dark one would be 2019 with students with proficiency, and the same thing with our economically disadvantaged students. Again, small numbers within this cohort.
And again, proficiency is a 3, 4, or 5 on a scale of 1 to 5.
Correct. All right. We transition to science quickly, not quickly, but science. Similar, grade 4, all students take the New York State grade 4 assessment. And again, you see very comparable in that one. 8th grade, we see the split. Again, in 8th grade, we have an accelerated course of living environment, which we had about 30 students take, and then we had roughly 29 students take the New York Science 8 exam. And in comparison, for the Science 8 in 2019, 40 students took Look of Environment and 24 took the New York State 8 exam.
And on a future slide, you have the breakdown of the kids that are in the top of that cohort that took the regions.
Yep,
Yeah, I figured.
coming up.
I figured. I didn't want to jump the gun.
Next slide.
There we go.
Right. So these are students in the middle school who took the Regents examination in algebra, which were 29 students, and living environment, which were 30 students. And so it's broken down into 2 levels, all of them obviously being proficiency, which is 65% or higher. But the yellow shaded talks about mastery, and mastery is 85 or higher on the exam. And so you can kind of see how the students fare in that one.
So there's a typo. Mastery is greater than, he had, we have to be reminded to use a microphone. I'll try to be a good board Betty. But passing is actually, later, it's less than 85, but more than
Correct.
65.
Yes.
Okay, that's, yeah,
Yep.
okay, gotcha.
Yep. Okay, great. So I'm going to transition into a different piece, but they're all New York State assessments, which are Regents examinations, which are high school level courses, and particularly for students in 8th grade in algebra and living assignment who are advanced. Again, Haldane administered the following Regents exams in 2021, which are English, Algebra 1, Earth Science, and Living Environment. All exams have multiple choice and open-ended items. They take the exam when they've completed a course of study, so in many ways they are true summative assessments. They come at the very end. They take the assessment that way. Report is generally put on a transcript. They really don't get that to see their errors or anything in the exam. They take it, and it's moved that way. Interesting to note, though, down at the bottom is, because of the situation last year, New York State did not offer Regents exams in chemistry, global history, and U.S. history and government. So they were not offered by the New York State whatsoever, so we don't have any results for those. And again, just to refresh, students in the high school were hybrid for at least the first half of the year, 2 days in, 2 days in person, 2 days remote, multiple distractions with quarantines and everything else that was there. And so these exams, Algebra 1 and Common Core ELA, right? Again, this is the percent of students scoring a 3, 4, or 5. These 2 exams are scaled on a 5-point scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. A performance level of 5 basically means that a student has exceeded the Common Core expectations. It's basically analogous to concurrency, what is considered to be mastery level. A performance level of 4 is described as meets Common Core expectations, and students with performance scales of 3 have scaled scores, what the state says is between 65 and 75, so still proficiency, and it's defined as partially meeting Common Core expectations. And performance 2 and lower is which they only partially meet for them, and there's a safety net for students who kind of meet in those areas. But this talks about all students who took Algebra 1, both middle school and high school students, as well as students who take the Common Core ELA Regents examination last year in 2021.
Can you give a little more a description of what's the safety net for qualified students, what that refers to?
Yeah, so a safety net for qualified students is obviously graduation requirements say that you have to pass X amount of Regents examinations in order to be eligible to not only receive course credit, but credit itself, which we can count towards graduation. Some students can qualify what are called safety nets. So if they don't score above a 2 on a Regents exam, right? There are other pathways that students are able to demonstrate, or the scores themselves, depending on individual students, can be scaled lower to be able to count to meet that requirement.
Okay, thanks.
The threshold has changed in many ways. A transition to the others that were given. These living environment, both middle school and high school and earth science, they are only scored on a 1, 2, 3, 4 scale. Don't know why. Just is. So students who get a level 3 or a level 4 are considered proficient. Same thing, 4 would be described as mastery, and 3 would be levels of proficiency, which would be equivalent to 65 or higher. So, great. So the big questions are, how are New York State assessments measures utilized within the process of triangulating multiple measures with students? What role do they serve? within this process of trying to assess student learning or better understand where students are. And I think one of this, I've shared with this slide before, but we kind of shift this conversation a little bit to localized measures and how these state assessments can influence the ways in which we're designing and implementing our local curriculum. As I've shared before at other presentations, the standards are common throughout New York State, but if you go to any school district in New York State, you're going to see them implemented in different ways. And that's because schools reflect kind of the values and the priorities of districts. And so districts have different values and priorities that they emphasize, and you see that through instruction and through ways in which students are interacting with curriculum and demonstrating understanding of that. And so when we speak of like the Haldane Essentials, right, as I shared on previous slides, the New York State assessments and NWA are designed to address a few of these, right? They're designed to kind of talk about students' critical thinking, problem solving, and written communication. But conversations need to kind of shift and also talk about how we assess growth mindset, or how do we assess students' emotional intelligence, or students' verbal communication, or students' wellness in many ways. And I think that this is where the strategic coherence plan provides a set of roadmap and a set of action items that that Haldane's been undertaking in trying to kind of bridge that measurements of state standards in localized curriculums and trying to demonstrate what we value out of students to learn not only the state standards but the other things that we want students to understand embodied by the Haldane Essentials. And so this provides ways to kind of be thinking about the action steps that we can actually take. In reflecting upon some of our work that we've embodied this year, we've talked a little bit about curriculum overview documents and documenting some of those, but a big piece of this is talking about our summative assessments, our assessment strategies, right? And so, when we're talking about student understanding, it's a natural shift to be thinking about, well, how are we assessing these things? In what ways do they demonstrate these things? And so there's crosswalks between making sure that our local curriculum are aligned to New York State standards and that we're meeting those standards, which is reflected in these types of documents, as well as thinking about how our assessment strategies are aligned to make sure that the data we get out of our classroom assessments, formative and summative, give us really good pictures about students' performance on some of these standardized measures such as NWA as well as New York State. So taking them all together is trying to calibrate when we do kind of these crosswalks, is the lingo in the field, of taking our local curriculum and walking that through what our state curriculum is asking us to do and identifying areas that we're either overemphasizing or not emphasizing enough and making adjustments based upon the data we're getting out of other kind of standardized measures. And that all kind of plays into how we're calibrating our local practices, right? Again, just to drill down as we talk about our unit documents over on this, it doesn't show up. I'm sorry. I'm moving it too fast. Okay. Anyways, there's an entire assessment plan down there when we take this in more detail, where we start thinking about our assessments in terms of diagnostic, formative, and summative, right? Thinking about encapsulating with any given unit of study the multiple ways that we're going to be assessing our student understanding within that. So, the final slide just kind of talks about these kind of both ways that we try to look at data, including New York State assessments, to make informed decisions. And so it's kind of this intersection between data-driven instruction and intervention and using that for curriculum data inquiry cycles, right? The ways that we're consistently taking data information from these measurements we have and how it informs kind of our curriculum process that we have for reevaluating what it is we're actually designing for students. And you can see this in a multitude of ways in which, Haldane has made shifts, right? So we had a new MTSS plan this year, which was recalibrated on some different measures and benchmarks for students based upon NWA as well as New York State assessments, as well as local assessments. We're working through a curriculum articulation process with teachers about documenting what it is exactly we're doing in our curriculum and being, that's always been happening, but ways in which it's intentional about our ways of meeting standards and assessing our students. Next fall, we're doing a participation in then a data institute for administrators and teachers to kind of hone our abilities to kind of look at data in a method that kind of actually identifies issues and helps us move the organization forward in making change in some of those ways. In middle school, there's been program adoptions in science. They've adopted a FOSS program to better meet some of these next generation standards that are coming. There's been a big ideas math adoption in grades 6 through 8 that has happened in the last couple of years. This year, we've instituted a process for examining our K-5 math process and looking at a systematic way of looking at other resources that are out there, as well as their professional development that might kind of help us think about what we might want to do in transitioning to maybe a new math resource. We have elementary literacy PD with a consultant set up for next year, multiple opportunities for our teachers to work with a consultant and be talking about best practices and moving some of our literacy instruction within our elementary schools. Elementary school's been busy in talking about redesigning their report cards, to be thinking about the different ways that we report student success on a more localized way against things that we value. And we've been looking at a Tier 3 reading program that Ms. Rounds had started prior to her left, and thinking about some of our students in our elementary schools and middle school that really kind of need that extra support or kind of a really intensive support, I should say, in the areas of literacy instruction and reading. Those are just some examples of the way in which the organization has responded to some of this triangulating of multiple measures.
Great. Josh, I do have a quick question.
Yes.
The problem that teachers always had with NWA and MAPS was that when it was first implemented, you never knew what was on because they're adaptive, and you don't really get much feedback on what kids missed when they take the assessment. Has that changed in the past few years, or are basically our teachers getting, and our students merely getting a number, which is an assessment of what they have, but they don't actually know what they've missed?
Yeah. Specific to your question about what they've missed, I would have to look into that for a little bit. I don't know if it has changed in the years where they've actually come back to say, of the questions that were provided, this is what they missed. I would say that the amount of information that is provided through NWA is extensive for teachers. In many ways, it's actually trying to figure out calibrating best ways of thinking about what we want to be utilizing and doing some really good professional development and trying to think about what those results mean and what is the best data to use out of that, and starting to have some of those conversations. So I don't think it's just a score anymore by any means. It spits out strategies, it spits out subgroups, it spits out ways of grouping students. I think it has much more informative ways that I've seen, and I think that our teachers have responded to in thinking about informing practice.
So in the New York State assessments that give the questions back to the teachers, you feel that it's best to continue to use the MAPS program or NWEA in association with that 3-5 assessments, the New York State ones?
Now, on the state end, you'll get an item analysis back from students on performance on questions. And so there's a situation where in looking through that information, you can tell if there's a vast amount of questions that your students have missed. If there's 75% of students have missed a certain question or two questions, you can kind of zero in on that a little bit. So I think that's not to cut.
And teachers still have an opportunity with the students that they had in class to then use that exact data with those students, or those students are then going to the next teacher and you're just kind of thinking.
So they go to the next teacher. That does happen. But there are practices where that cohort is moving up and you're getting an item analysis back based upon that cohort. Mm-hmm. I think best practices are sharing that item analysis with their future teachers, right? Because that can inform how they're starting off the school year, and if there's any things they either need to reteach, go back to. And it's also, that comes up from the other way, and it's also good information to share with the, I want to say, previous teacher that took the assessment, because that plays into kind of what we talked about with that crosswalk of saying, okay, your curriculum last year was this, and this item analysis pointing out that many students missed in this area. That provides them an opportunity to go back, kind of rework that, so as this next cohort comes up, that's addressed.
And you're seeing that interaction, you're seeing that crosswalk with the data, but also with the teachers, with the students. Are you seeing that in the?
I'm not seeing it only in the fact it's my first year, and haven't seen it.
I won't ask Phil.
Since I got here, But, it's a conversation that we've been having in not only in thinking about this presentation, but in general, right, is how we're using that. And I think that's exactly what the aspiration is of what we're going to be doing.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Sure, yeah. So from the data at the beginning, we saw a bunch of slides of different pieces of data. What was your interpretation? What did you take away from either that or I'm assuming that you wallowed in like individual students, and so what's your analysis and what's your recommendation?
Okay. I'll start off. So my bias would be that, in my former role as a middle school principal, we were on the opposite end. We were probably in that situation of where we had about 780 kids and very low participation rate in the New York State assessments. First glance is, I was extremely impressed by the participation rates, and I'm impressed by the results from students. I think, like I said earlier, there's a story there. Not in hyperbole, but last year was an extraordinary year for many individuals in many different ways. And I think it's reflective of the efforts of the school district in trying to make the best out of that situation. I think that using data to spur conversations is always a really good practice. And I'm excited about the opportunities that present itself in taking a look at some of the things that we had talked about and looking across cohorts. And I think everybody talks about the impacts of COVID, and we can say that for a period of time, but at some point we need to be reactive and start doing as a result of it, right? Everybody had an experience with COVID, and I think in the profession we just need to start thinking about how we utilize some of that data in the context of which it is, and how we can start having conversations about individual students in some of those ways. So my analysis of it is, in terms of that assessment itself, students did well if you're looking at it in areas. I do think we've pointed out the math part in Math 8 presents an opportunity as an outsider to come in the first time to take a look and say, hey, what might be happening in that situation, and not just that situation, but what is the structures around all of that? And it presents itself to be looking at ways of asking some good questions in non-evaluative ways, right? They're true on-demand assessments for kids. So we're asking them to ride a bike. That's the bike they're riding, and now we need to be able to take a look at that and see what might be ways that the organization could respond to it. If that answers the question.
I had a question about the difference between the content of the tests between the NWEA and the New York State tests. I know we're mostly talking about the New York State test here, but for the NWEA, which is used much more frequently here, right, just in terms of it's twice a year, how does that, a child's current curriculum that they're getting at the moment, is the NWEA reflective of that in terms of the content? We all sort of know where the content of the New York State test comes, but when they're looking at the NWEA, is that things that they're learning at the moment directly? Does that make sense? Or is it more sort of based on something that kids are doing all over?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, that's a great question, right? When we talk about the spirit of that answer, is the degree to which what students are experiencing in NWA predictive of what they're either experiencing within their classroom or predictive of their performance on the New York State assessments. That is in some ways the purpose of kind of an NWA or universal screener. And standing up here tonight, I would say that I'm not sure the answer to that question. But it is a very good question to be thinking about in terms of how NWA is used not only in constructs to our MTS plan, but in the ways in which it is predictive to student success, not only within their localized classroom, but also in New York State assessments. There should be some sort of correlation with that in some ways. I would say my experience with it is, on some of the questions, although I would say that what they're experiencing in their local curriculums is similar in ways to what they're being asked on the NWEA, but they tend to be more of thinking type, reasoning type things, questions, and skills in that way. Not to say that in areas of math it's not more content area, but particularly in the reading aspect, their reading comprehensions, their inferencing, their synthesizing, their reading comprehension, that is something I feel like teachers are doing generally all along. But that itself is a good question. The degree to which NWA is predictive and aligned with localized curriculums, I think, is the spirit of kind of what we were talking about at the beginning of the presentation, which is multiple measures, and taking a look at all of those and trying to see where all these pieces of data are spitting at us and aligning in different ways.
I would have assumed that the map has like a version that's mapped at the map. That NWA has a version of the map that's aligned with state standards, but I realize I don't know if that's, I don't know that at all. No, I don't know. Yeah.
I'll ask one more question in a slightly different way. If I gave you $100,000 to invest against the highest opportunity that you see in the data, where would you invest it?
$100,000 to invest in
The highest opportunity that you see in the data.
If you gave me $100,000, I would definitely be looking at investing in that in a pretty robust AIS program, right? And so rationale is, if we have ways of identifying students, and I'm sure we do, any teacher you could ask that might be struggling in areas of mathematics or English language arts, and we were able to buy or order or create a really responsive Tier 2 and Tier 3 program that could take students that are experiencing that difficulty in a very flexible measure. And what I mean by that is give them that pull-out support with the overall goal of getting them right back in, right? And I think something along those lines, I think I would need more probably than 100,000. Sure. But I think that presents that greatest opportunity, because you're talking about moving those students who are like close high twos, mid twos, and just getting them over into that proficiency area, I would think for some of our students is not a massive leap, right? That's not to say that there couldn't be a leap from a 3 to a 4. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have an investment in that way. But if you're asking for bang for the buck for trying to move into proficiency, I think it's really having really well-targeted programs that really can get at the heart of what students need in that particular topic or skill, give them that really high intense support and get them right back in there. I think that's where you would find, it's my opinion of where you'd find your bang for your buck.
Okay. I'm going to interpret that back to you, but correct me if I'm wrong. My interpretation would be that is a fantastic ongoing operational structure to have, that
Yes.
level of support and engagement and identifying individuals but that is not specifically tied to the data that you presented to us this evening. Is that a fair? Nothing in here would lead you to believe that. There's like, there wasn't a bar graph on here that says AIS is an answer. I think AIS is a great answer as a structural opportunity, but there's nothing here that's like, oh my God, this bar says we need AIS.
No.
Not that fourth grade math.
Yeah.
What's that?
Not that fourth grade math.
I think it was 8th grade.
Yeah.
I was thinking about fourth grade.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. That's fine.
In particular, no.
That's fine. Yeah. Cool.
I was debating about whether to say this, but I'm going to build on John's question. I mean, I think in terms, like, using data is something that the board has talked about for a while. It's something Dr. Benante is working on. It is a growth area for the district. It is a process. It is a path we are on. I want to see, not next year necessarily, but down the path, I want to see us to be able to track our children who come in at risk and to track and see how we're serving those children over multiple years. That's the measure of Haldane success. The measure of Haldane success in the years coming forward is not how we are, definitely serving all of our children, but it's not our kids that come in already on track, keeping them on track. That's great, I love it, but I really believe that the measure of Haldane success is going to be based on those children that come in at risk early on how we're able to serve those children over time, you know. And I think we're moving in that direction, but I don't, you know, I don't think we're there yet. We've definitely taken lots of steps, but I feel really strongly about that. I think we all do. I mean, everybody's shaking their head, so I'm not saying something novel, you know, but again, this is a road that we're on. It's something that's really important to the board, and so to be aspirational about it.
Good. Thank you so very
Thank
much,
you all
Mr.
very
Elder.
much. Yep.
And now we'll move on to communication from the public. I'll read this whole paragraph into the record. I know. I'll skip around a bit. But the Haldane Board of Education desires and values input from the entire school community. This first public comment session is reserved for comments on any special presentations or active agenda items. I'll check around if there is anyone from the community here. Don't think so. Okay, we're good to go on. Let's move on then. Moving on to information reports. They're here for review. These reports are going to be presented for approval at our next business meeting. And then moving on to consent agenda minutes. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? No? These are the minutes from our May 17th workshop meeting and looks like the May 23rd special meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? All right, moving on to consent agenda financial. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? All right, and then moving on to consent agenda personnel. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Dr. Benante?
Just 2 comments. Sean, first I wanted to thank the leadership of the CSEA, who represents our maintenance and operation workers, our clerical staff, our aides, on what I felt was a very constructive negotiations process. We brought that negotiation for their updated contract to closure actually back in March, just given some things that are outside of our control and the CSEA's control. It took some while to go through the ratification process, but I'm glad that we've brought the process to closure with your approval by the end of the school year. Second, I just wanted to thank Mr. Cowan for his service to the Haldane community over the course of the past year. I made in a note to the community about the resignation, or Dan's resignation, I stated that we would seek interim support in the meantime, and I think I misspoke there. In working with Josh, we felt that we'd like to actually first see if there's any qualified candidates out there. So we have the position posted right now, thanks to Josh's efforts. So it's been posted for a few days now, and we're going to see who's out there and if there's any qualified candidates for our next AD, and we'll fall back on the interim role. We don't feel that we're going to be in any different position a few weeks from now if there is not a qualified candidate in terms of being able to secure a qualified interim. So we'll fall back on that if necessary, but the position is now posted. I wanted to make note of that. That's it.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? All right. Moving on to new business. I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Platt.
Be it resolved that, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the recommendation of the Committee on Preschool Special Education and Committee on Special Education as presented.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any
Need a
oppo-
motion.
Oh,
We
sorry.
need a
Thank you. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. All right. Subject approval of resolution, release and settlement agreement, Ms. Platt.
Be it resolved that, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the terms of the release and settlement agreement involving student number 40324, and be it resolved that the Superintendent of Schools be and hereby is authorized to execute such release and settlement agreement on behalf of the district.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Great. Now, come to the calendars. Subject 3 is our July reorg meeting, shortly followed by our August business meeting date and the retreat date. So I'm glad to have these as a point of reference, the June 7th reorg July. So looking down here, it is decided that the reorganizational meeting will be held on a day other than July 5th. The board should consider adopting a resolution establishing the date as follows. How do we feel about the July 5th date, the day after the 4th of July is a reorg meeting? And
It worked for me.
it's fine for me.
Rolling there.
Yeah.
You okay?
Fine.
Yeah.
5. Yeah, fine.
Oh.
Don't be strong-armed into it.
No, is that just a regular length meeting?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a series of appointments that had to be made, swearing in of new officers as part of the reorg, and then a number of appointments for the year ahead that will be made at the meeting. I would estimate half hour to 45 minutes.
That would be fine. Thank you. Yep.
Wonderful. That was easy. July
That was
5th.
the easiest
easy.
reorg scheduling we've had.
Thank goodness. Okay, thanks. Oh, I guess I should check in with you next year.
See what happens
So,
when
you
you
send me
put a
your
new
Google
guy in
Calendar,
there.
would you? Okay,
And
and
Ezra with the,
At 7, right?
say that again?
At the usual time.
Yes,
7.
I believe it's 7. And next, our August business meeting date.
That's-
This is the trickier one for sure. Last year was held on Tuesday, August 24th.
and just as a reminder for the board, we use this to somewhat catch appointments that need to be made prior to the start of the school year. So sometime around there
Right.
is beneficial to the district and our operation.
It might be best to maybe send around some possible dates, or do we want to try to settle on a Tuesday? And
I mean, I don't know. I can do the 23rd.
you can do the 23rd? All right, let me look at this now.
The first day of school is the 31st?
The 31st is a
31st.
conference day, and the kids are coming in on the 1st.
There's a chance that we will be taking a vacation on the 23rd,
On the 23rd?
but I could do the week before on the 16th.
The 16th? I can do either. Tuesdays are
Okay.
open to the world for me, so.
Yeah. I'm not going on vacation this summer, so I can do the 16th.
16th is good for you?
I have money to go to New Jersey, that's about it.
You have money to go to?
Maggie, what do you?
What do you think?
16th?
23rd's better, but
Well, if 4 of us can be on the 23rd, and
Yeah,
John, if you
I
just
think
want
that's fine.
to zoom in.
That
we'll
works.
go- Yeah, you feel comfortable about that? All right,
Thank you.
That's all
23rd.
And I'm not settled yet, so who knows?
All right. Well, maybe this can help you make your
Yeah,
decision.
exactly. Influence our decisions. Maybe that'll make me go
Don't-
away.
Yeah. Don't plan your vacation around this meeting. All right, and then our retreat as well, which can sort of, I suppose, follow or come right before the 24th. That might be a little more problematic, especially since we don't know what your vacation is going to be, but.
Yeah, so we've approached this differently in
Yeah.
years past. We've either had the retreat, scheduled the meeting in late August a little earlier, and then convened into retreat after. Could do the opposite of that, obviously. Or we've attempted to hold the retreat on an alternate date, if that works for the board, so.
From a goal-setting perspective, what,
Sooner the better.
Yeah.
But I realize that may be unrealistic,
Yeah.
so.
could we have our retreat before that, days before that business meeting?
Okay, anytime after the reorg,
Anytime after the reorg.
because then we'll have our
All
full
right.
board sworn in.
Great.
Maggie, are you busy the week of the 15th entirely?
that was our slotted for a potential vacation. It
Yeah,
hasn't been-
exactly.
No, so
Okay,
that,
good.
that's,
Nailed
that,
down,
that,
yeah.
that counts
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
busy.
That's busy.
Yeah.
That's busy.
What, are people in
Maybe
town
we
the
should
week of
just
the 8th?
all agree to take vacations at the same time. Maybe we can,
Sure.
That's not how it works, Ezra, I promise. How about August 6th, earlier? How's that work for you, Phil?
Oh,
I am
to do it on
away that
Saturday.
week.
Yeah.
out of curiosity, and we could also decide that maybe we'll pull calendars if this goes on or is overly laborious. On July 5th, after the reorg, I think you had a conflict potentially, Maggie, right? Because you were asking about the length of the meeting.
I just have a flight the next morning at
Got it.
5, but I can.
That does remain an option, potentially, to do it after the reorg and to spend a few hours talking about district goals. I have the admin retreat later that week. We do that earlier now. So I think really the part of the intention of the retreat is to culminate in coalescing around some goal areas for the district for the upcoming year. I feel that we're in a good spot for that, just given the discussions we've had throughout the year. There are some other procedural matters, and I think we'll also be on the agenda. So we'll need.
What about the end of July? Like the last week-ish.
I'm in town.
You're in town?
I'm sorry, I'm away. I'm here that week. I'm away the 30th to the 6th.
Okay, so it could be the week of the 24th?
So the first week of.
Sometime? Maybe.
21st?
25th, 24th. Yeah.
24th, week of the 24th, July.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm here.
Yes.
I can do that as well. Yeah.
You're
All
here.
right.
Yeah, I can do the
Ezra?
week of the 25th.
I have no life.
Week of the 24th.
All right,
Shall we say the 26th?
Why don't we pencil it in
Yes.
for the 26th?
Tuesdays are.
Just keep it on a Tuesday?
Yeah.
And do a evening, sort of late afternoon to
Late
evening.
afternoon, if
Yeah.
that's okay.
Like,
Sounds great.
yeah.
So we'll be home a little earlier.
Well, who's
Great.
grilling? I mean,
Sounds like you are.
So the retreat, like, I don't know, 4-ish.
4.
Great.
Is that okay?
Yep. Could it be? Did we actually schedule all three of those?
That's amazing.
That was so
Amazing.
efficient.
Great. All right. Moving on then. This is our second communication from the public. Has anyone come in? I don't see that anyone's come in. I think we're still good. Board reflections. Anyone?
I would just, as a personal reflection, I would just encourage, I know this has been a challenging budget season for the Garrison School District. Certainly, reflecting on Dr. Benante's comment earlier about our struggles and our work to try to help them be successful, having watched a couple of their board meetings, it's a significant challenge for them and for the students, to your point, many of whom will become our students. So I would personally, not a board position, I would personally encourage everybody to take an active interest in supporting them in what they're going through right now, because it's certainly challenging.
Yeah.
So, and we wish them the best of luck.
Thank you, John.
I wish them the best of luck.
I had the pleasure of hosting our student representative, Luke Perella, as my intern at the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival for the last month as part of the senior internship program. He gave me 20 hours a week of his life, and while also competing mightily in his long-distance running career as it sort of comes to an end here at Haldane before he moves on to BU. But he did a wonderful job, and I gave him the opportunity to see lots of different things going on in the not-for-profit theater world, primarily in the world of education, but he created a couple of pieces that we're going to be publishing in our season program to sort of work for younger audiences that might be coming to see the shows this year. But it was really a pleasure to have him there, and I'm really proud of the
great.
program. So it was
Fantastic.
wonderful. All right. Phil, Dr. Benante.
No final thoughts. I've said enough tonight.
Great. Then I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.